All right, so we just had a sermon on grace. Talked about the value of it. We talked about what it is and what it isn't, gospel versus grace, grace versus love, grace versus faith and hope and joy, and all these things. And you mentioned something to me, just a perfect thing to add to it. What were your thoughts that stood out to you the most?
So I think what my struggle, my thought with it was showing grace in comparison to being dismissive.
Okay.
So I feel that sometimes we don't let ourselves know the importance of something, or we'll just dismiss it and not address it. So I think to show grace, someone needs to know that you're extending grace to them, or at least, if you don't address a situation, it's tough to forgive somebody.
We talked about just like letting it go, right? It feels like we might think grace is just letting it go, but you thought those aren't the same thing.
Right. It might look the same on the surface because you're not boiling up and getting upset, not letting things get to you, but you're not addressing something that should be addressed.
So say you have a conflict at work or something, what would grace look like in the dismissive kind of way of just dismissing it, or versus actually expressing grace? What would be the difference?
I think if you have a discussion with it and deal with it and let them know that you're okay with it and that you forgive their point of view, but you also address your point of view. So I think sometimes we'll just bite our tongue and not lash out a conflicting point of view, but not letting anybody know what we think and what we believe is right. Which is challenging because a lot of times when we say what we believe is right, it will start conflict, and I think that it's even more challenging to extend grace because that grace will be challenged, that your belief will be challenged. But we need to say things in love, but at the same time, I think we need to say things more.
Yeah, that's interesting because it feels like if we're going to be people who love the unlovely, that could be a silent thing or taken as a silent thing. Like, well, I just love people despite the fact that they have these certain opinions or these theologies or this personality or whatever it might be. But then silently putting up with something isn't exactly the same thing as grace, because that also could be equal to avoidance. It could also be equal to, it could look right on the outside but not actually be the same thing. But if you say to someone, I have a problem with this, or this isn't how I think about something, then you're forcing it to be grace instead of to be like avoidance, or just brush things under the carpet because it doesn't really matter, I'm going to try to let it go.
Right.
I think that's what you're saying.
Right. So you're expressing your belief and standing up for what you believe in, but still giving grace to their beliefs.
Yeah.
So I understand you feel that way. You have every right to feel that way, but this is what I believe to be true.
Yeah.
Not just simply biting your tongue and avoiding the situation, which is good to a point where you're not, condemning somebody else. But at the same time, you're really not standing up for what you believe in because you just let it go.
And it sounds so much like Jesus too, right? He said the things simply and blatantly to the people around him that were wrong, and they hated him for it. So he invited that retribution, knowing that that was part of the grace. He didn't just ignore it or walk around it, and that's the difference between grace and love. Instead of just loving and dismissing the sin, he extended grace. He spoke to the people directly, and then invited whatever their so it was almost like he needed to extend grace for their behavior and then extend grace for their response also. But it sounds like exactly like what he did. And it also feels like, and that's why I'm glad you brought up this point, because it feels like with grace there has to be some kind of sacrifice, right? With love there doesn't necessarily need to be a sacrifice, and with dismissing things there is no sacrifice necessarily. But if grace is God's grace to love us and to offer his son on the cross for us, then we might want to take safe routes to grace where we can let something go but not suffer for it. If there's no sacrifice on our part, it's kind of like, well, I'll just bite my tongue. And so when you say something about truth and extend love in that way, it's inviting retribution, which then really kind of makes it grace. Speak the truth in love, like grace is a spoken thing. So I love your point. I think it's awesome.
And at the same time, it's not about getting the results you want.
Right?
It's about just stand up for what you believe in, and, you know, showing love and forgiving others if they are not meeting that, or, you know, or even for ourselves. But sometimes we look for the results more than, you know, like,
That's true too.
you know, if something like a cause we don't believe in, you know, we have to be careful how we handle that. You know, like, can't just be like, that's wrong. You're in condemning those, you know, for not believing the same way. It's not about that. It's about expressing how we believe, and, you know, while being graceful about it.
But speaking truth too.
It's still speaking.
He's still speaking truth. I love that. Take care, brother. So, anyway, I put Brendon on the spot because he brought up these great points. I wish I had finished the sermon the way that he did finish the sermon, but I just thought that it was good to challenge us with those thoughts too, about what grace is and what it isn't. That was kind of the whole point of the sermon today. Like, what is grace really? And grace is not avoidance. Grace is not letting things go. That might be a part of grace, but it's much bigger than that. And speaking the truth, despite consequences, is a really cool part of grace. And so thank you for sharing your thoughts, and hopefully it'll bless you as much as it blessed us.